Not live and almost from Beverly Hills, it's the Bob Dean Show. Yay! I want to welcome everybody to, I believe this is episode 38. And this is going to be flying by the seat of our pants, episode 2 per se. Our first episode was called Flying by the Seat of Our Pants. This one is our first videoed. Hi, everybody. It's me, Bob Dean. That's what I look like. And this is Louie LaCava and Dennis Olson. My producer, Sammy Junio, hi Sam, is behind camera. Hi. So just bear with us, y'all, because this is our first episode on cam. And we're just going to act like y'all aren't out there in podcast land. Welcome, fellas. Before we get started with, this is Louie. Say hi, Louie.
Hello, Louie.
And Dennis Olson.
Hello, Dennis.
And want to say shout out to Nicole Summerfield, our 405-inch wedge traffic reporter. We started recording earlier today, so Nicole will be with us next episode. Want to say hi to Zach Herndon. Hi, Zach, out there in Bloomington, Indiana. Zach is one of the original backbones of the Bob Dean Show. Yay! Hey. And he does technical work for us from his palatial Bloomington, Indiana home. Hey, so cool. Anyway, I'm so excited. We're on camera. Yay. First of all, I'm going to say a couple of things. I will be appearing at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood on Monday, March 12th, 7:45 showtime. Be there or be square. Because I'm reasonably amusing. I'm a much better comic than I'm a bartender. You can visit me at Wolfgang Steakhouse by Wolfgang's Wiener Wednesday through Saturdays for your viewing pleasure as well. And any other announcements we need to make? I'm just excited because this is our first one on camera.
I'd like to say something about last week. Last week I said that Joan Jett was in with the in crowd back then, but that's kind of fake because she's always in with the in crowd. And I said that her house was 3 blocks down from the whiskey, but it was actually more like 3 doors from the back of the gas station, across from the parking lot behind Licorice Pizza. So if I'm going to talk, I better say the truth.
That's right. Thank you, Dennis. And we're also going to get into a series of punk rock episodes because I think it's fascinating. I'm starting to network with some really cool people who we're going to talk about some really cool stuff that's led to a lot of really uncool people that think that they're punk rockers, but they're not. No names mentioned. No names. Posers. Okay, anyway. So Louie LaCava. Hey, Louie. Yay. Nice to be here. Louie, you live down in San Pedro now?
Yeah.
That's where your residence is, but you've lived all over the United States.
Yes. Lived in Utah, Missouri, upstate New York, Kansas for a long time.
And what about other countries?
Japan.
All right.
Japan. What'd you do in Japan?
I was teaching English.
No kidding.
Yeah.
How cool is that? I have a friend who from Fort Lauderdale who taught. She moved to Rome and taught English in Rome.
Very nice.
But were you learning Japanese?
Ego oshieta. No, I used to be fluent in it. I am not now, so it's all broken.
My brother traveled. Hi, Greg. Greg Dean. You better be listening to the Bob Dean Show. Yay. On your international travels back and forth to Asia. My brother Greg spends a lot of time in Asia now. Yes, I said it. Okay. Really, this is
stopping it.
Well, this is just neat because we're on video, and honestly, this is kind of neat. So, let's see. You've lived all over the country. What's your favorite place you've lived?
Oh, really? Ultimately, I mean, every place has a lot of good things going for it, really. But once you're a South Bay LA guy, that's kind of it. But there's a lots of things that I liked about Kansas. I did like the weather, the changing leaves in fall, huge thunderstorms, snow.
Yeah, change of season.
And get out. You could leave Wichita, Kansas, in 20 minutes. You'd be out on the farm to market dirt roads that haven't changed since 100 years. You know. And I really enjoy just driving those roads and finding old barns and abandoned homes.
I swear to God, I love abandoned homes. If Walls Could Talk is my ultimate science fiction fantasy. And when I was growing up in Nashville, which is just just bulldozed to death now. Sorry if I'm offending anybody there. But at the time, the area of town where we originally lived, had been farm country that was just starting to be developed, and there were a lot of not a lot, but a few that it was the craziest thing. It's like an old car in the garage, and the house was still furnished and things. Right. Like maybe it's somebody died, and the family was just like, it's still on property they owned or whatever, and just didn't want to deal with it. I love kicking around and stuff like that.
Yeah, I usually didn't take anything from places like that, but the clothes would be there, and the dishes and the sink and everything.
Yep.
I did take a bat from one place, but that's about it. So.
Well, that reminds me of a story which I probably have told before, but it's fascinating. It was Manuel Noriega. I think it was him. He was the guy, the general that was doing all the drugs and all that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. He had. I think it was him. So the story is what what I'm going for about abandoned homes and stuff. But it was either it was an island. There's 3 islands. Going onto Miami Beach, and one of them I think there's Star Island, and that's where Al Capone had a home as well. And we're going to get into a lot of that stuff here in the upcoming.
He purchased that in 27.
Oh, you know that, right?
Yes.
No, okay, great. Okay,
the
so
Palm Island estate. Yes.
Okay, there was Palm Island, Star Island, and what they are these man-made islands that were established in the 20s, and with these gorgeous mansions that were built around the waterside part. And I mean, they're small islands, and they're really, really, really cool. But Noriega, there were also a couple of little apartment buildings, and my friends Claire and Stuart lived in one of the apartment buildings, and she's like, "You got to come over here right away." This house that I guess when he fled the country with his family, the house had been sitting as they left it, but they started to tear it down, and they were tearing it down with everything in it, and they started out with the east wall.
That's horrible.
No, north, south. All right, the east wall of Manuel Noriega's Miami Beach mansion had been torn down, and it was like a dollhouse, a real dollhouse, because the wall was gone, the sun was shining into it, and it was amazing. The rooms were furnished, the clothes were hanging, blah, blah, blah. I did take a letter, but I don't know what happened to it. But yeah, that's fascinating stuff. But isn't it really? It's cool as shit when you get to walk around, and I didn't feel like I was traipsing on somebody's personal stuff because they abandon it.
Exactly.
There have been there's a couple houses in the neighborhood that they're gentrifying in my neighborhood, and there's been this one where this a very curious man lived on the corner, and he and I've lived on the block for 13 years. He apparently passed away, and from the inside of his home, it looked like he probably just went to the hospital by himself and passed because they started to tear it down, so the doors and all that were off. But you walk inside, and the books were still on the shelves, and the family pictures still on the mantle. It was heartbreaking.
Getting on track with the abandoned homes thing, although Capone's old home in Palm Island isn't abandoned, but I think there was security issues, and that's why he purchased there. So on the island, there's one way on,
one way off, and it's guard gated all the time.
And you have a dock of your own. You can get out in a boat if
you
need to.
Yep.
So that's what they were down there for.
Yeah.
And what a time to live down there too.
I know. Wasn't it perfect?
Well,
your white linen Palm Beach suits and Panama straw hats.
Not anymore, honey. All right, so you are a self-proclaimed punk rock gypsy.
Sure.
Meaning that's where you've lived all around and done all kinds of different things. And
I'll own it.
What a cool, unusual life, man.
It's been kind of like being an 8-ball, getting knocked around a table. Yeah, so.
That's neat.
I thought
I was, I'd lived in Miami for years and now out here. So as continental as I appear, I'm not very well traveled. But seriously, even if domestically, that's awesome. Learning so much about the country and different spots and all that.
Gives you a different viewpoint.
Well, what we're going to do, since you and Dennis are punk rockers,
Hello.
Real punk rockers, and there is such a thing as existing real punk rockers, I think there it goes again. Did you hear it?
It's a ghost phone.
The ghost phone.
Seriously, did you hear it that time?
No.
Well, anyway, maybe we have a ghost here on the Bob Dean Show. Yeah.
Welcome. All are
welcome on the show. Come, children, come. All are welcome. And Dennis can tell you the story about. Did he tell you about Darby Crash's house right around the corner?
Oh yeah, we've been there together.
Oh, that's right. You took him over there.
I went to
met him.
Darby's grave the first time Reggie was ever at his grave. Now I call Dennis Reggie just so everybody knows. So.
Would you prefer us to call you Reggie?
I own either.
Regimental.
Regimental is Dennis's punk rock.
That was his name 38 years ago.
Well, it still is to most of your friends, right?
Dinosaur.
Well, but that is so. The 6 degrees of separation. It's so friggin' awesome in that one, and we'll talk about that on another episode of the Bob Dean Show. Yeah. Okay. Now, first of all, why don't you take off your hat, if I might ask? Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. We got it.
Baba Booey.
Not only is he a punk rocker, but he's a friggin' gangsta.
Gangsta.
For real. Now, gangster. This episode we're going to talk about your gangster.
Not
life.
like the lads or anything, but still.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're talking vintage gangster.
Right.
What are the lads? Are they like real gangsters now or
Well,
something?
it was the Death Squad, the LA Death Squad,
More of a modern thing.
in 1980. Some of the local LA punk guys, Hollywood punks primarily, organized, and it was to protect the scene. There's a lot of new people coming in, just hitting anybody they wanted, and these
Oh,
guys
you told
were-
me about that. Like people come, like kids coming in that thought they were punks and and just causing trouble and that sort of thing.
And these guys tried to regulate some of that. It was like,
The shit they saw in the media, they took as real violence when it was mock violence.
yeah, the media is really where all the violence came from. They literally.
LA Weekly.
Oh, the media f***s up everything. Sorry. But it's things like, even like Kent State, all those protests in the 60s and stuff like that. People were peacefully protesting, and as the way we should, but then they'd get the media would get in there and rouse somebody up, pay somebody to get in there and start the trouble so they could have something to film.
Yeah,
Yep. It's
definitely.
Anyway. So we're gonna touch on that too. I want to talk about happy stuff. No, well, happy gangster stuff.
happy
So
gangsters.
so seriously,
Happy
I don't know where to
Valentine's
start.
Day.
We were talking earlier, and there's just too many cool ways to go. You said in 1974. How old are you, if you I may ask?
Well, I never.
Well,
tell
you don't
them.
have-
I'm 55.
Okay, well we're the same. We're all that same age
We're in
group.
the
So
same-
in 1974, you said you saw the movie Bugsy Malone,
Yes.
and that's what inspired. And it's an all kids gangster film.
Yes, most people wouldn't know that. It comes out of England. It's big in England still as a play. All these schools do the play. Of course, it involves kind of faux machine guns and things, which our schools might, flip out about. But excellent production values, as the English always have when they're covering the past. And it starred Scott Baio, and it was the story of Fat Sam and his fight with Dapper Dan and the two gangs, and then of course Bugsy Malone saves the day and gets the girl in the end. So, but he wore exactly this hair in the movie, and it inspired me. I mean, that was it. I just immediately identified with candlestick phones, old cars, the old kinds of sinks in your bathroom or whatever it may be. you
Yeah,
know.
clawfoot tubs and
Yeah.
black and white checker tile in bathrooms. Yeah, it's awesome.
Exactly.
So continue. You have been researching. You have favorites. Tell us some of the things you've learned about some of your favorite gangsters.
Well, there's interesting things about various ones. Al Capone was soft-spoken. Al Capone kept his word. That doesn't mean he was necessarily less violent or anything, but he is not, as portrayed in the movies, a loud, obnoxious bore who's saying, "I'm going to take over the whole city, see?"
Listen,
That doesn't exist. Al Capone's boss, Al Capone, they don't know for sure, but he goes to Chicago from New York after killing a guy in New York to work for Johnny Torrio. Johnny Torrio worked for another guy, Big Jim Colosimo, right when Prohibition is starting. And it's generally assumed, although it's never been proven, Johnny Torrio kills Big Jim Colosimo and takes over the South Side bootlegging operations because Big Jim didn't want to get into booze. And Torrio saw what kind of money you were going to make in booze.
Now, as far as like organized gangs, they were in all cities, right? But what I don't really know why Chicago was the one that was focused in as far as the 30s Al Capone gangsters, where the same sort of things were going on in New York and Miami and Los Angeles.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
But what do you think it was the reason why Chicago was had such an influence on the stories and the gangsters that we seem to know by on the forefront?
Awesome question. And personally, I think it does boil down to Capone. He becomes the figurehead for Chicago gangsterism. Although there's like 20 gangs out there. I mean, Martin Guilfoyle and the South Side O'Donnells, the West Side O'Donnells. There's a million of them. The movies only focus on the North Siders. With Dion O'Banion in a conflict with Capone, but there was a bunch of gangs, but Capone survived and prospered, extremely smart guy. And he had a great tutor in Johnny Torrio, whose motto was, "We don't want no trouble." So you'd rather pay somebody off or have a cop move to the countryside rather than kill somebody. And that leads to a lot of success. And Capone was very, in general, pretty precision about killing people. You know, he's killing a big guy. It's a very intricate plot to get him, and bystanders aren't killed and that kind of thing. Just to give an example, in I believe it was 27, the Northsiders did a drive-by shooting on the Hawthorne Hotel, where Capone had headquarters set up at the time. That Hawthorne Hotel was in Cicero. And it's like the number of cars grows over the years, but it was something like 4 to 6 cars in procession firing at this restaurant where Capone was eating, with other people eating in there and everything. And the only person hit was a woman in a car out front. It had a fragment of glass go in her eye, and Capone paid all her medical bills, by the way. But
with an ambush like that, nobody else was hurt.
no, everybody hit the floor.
How crazy!
Yeah, well,
thank God, you know.
Yeah, really. That's not always the case with this kind of thing. But then, Capone turns around and knocks off Jaime Weiss. Jaime Weiss was running the Northsider gang out of Schofield's flower shop on North State Street. So Capone rents an apartment 2 doors up, and on the cross street also another apartment that looks down the alley. So he's looking. Anyway, these guys get back from court one day, and they're crossing the street, and there's a shotgun.
But no, he had a visual from both apartments directly. Yeah.
He got a Thompson submachine gun, which jammed after 30 rounds, and a pump shotgun up there, and they hit everybody and killed Jaime Weiss dead. And I mean, really dead. If you see the pictures, there's a bullet hole in his head, over his eye, and all this stuff. And they got who they wanted without collateral damage, as we would call it in Iraq today or whatever, you know. And so that was the difference between kind of wild, angry, undisciplined cowboy gangsters and what Capone was doing, which was really trying to be more professional in killing and making money and that kind of thing. You know?
Did he?
More responsible.
Yeah.
For his actions.
I mean, really, for what it's worth, at least, you know. Yeah. Now he was arrested they got him on tax evasion, and he died in prison.
No,
right? He did
he's
not?
released and it's kind of interesting. He's released in 39, I believe it is, and he's released from Alcatraz, and he goes down to San Pedro. He's at the federal facility on Terminal Island, where he meets his family. They take him to so we have a little Capone connection here in L.A. Then he goes to the Northeast to be treated for syphilis, which I think they call it tertiary, but it had gone into his brain, which only 1% of people with syphilis get that kind of. And he didn't have any luck on that one. But so his family took him to see doctors and that's why he was released early. Actually, was because of he had recurring spells of dementia, and he had spent the last year in Alcatraz in the medical ward in a cage, and in and out of his mind at certain times. And then
wow, that's fascinating. I mean, yeah, because you think, I heard, learned that he died of syphilis, but you don't think about the background, the details.
Right.
Of how that happened, or what happened, the circumstances that continue to grow and all that. That's wow.
And he ends up dying in 47 at the Palm Island estate in the guest house behind the pool.
Didn't you go to
Really?
his
Yes.
house?
Pardon?
Didn't you go to his house?
I have been to Al Capone's Chicago home on South Prairie, which was a real honor and a lot of luck. And
How did that come about?
well, I'd been to Chicago several times by myself, but this time I went with 2 friends, and we were all dressed like I am today with fedoras and overcoats and everything. And we're in
Which
front.
is very cool.
Thank you. And we're in front of Capone's house, and we're comparing the house to pictures from the 20s in books. And these 2 guys come down the street, and, "Hey, man, what you doing?" And we said, "We're looking at Al Capone's house." They go, "No, you're not looking at Al Capone's." We said, "We're looking at Al Capone's house." And they said, "Do you think these people know they live in Al Capone's house?" We said, yes, don't bother them, Yeah. But they went right up to the door and knocked. And this big guy named, I believe his name was Jason, came out. And And we talked to him for a bit, and then he said, just let these guys go on, and I'll take you through the house. And, he didn't ask for any money or anything, but we paid him because, he gets bothered. While we were there, people from Spain showed up to look at the house.
No kidding.
People from other parts of the country came
Wow.
up.
But yeah. And how touching
Yeah.
for him to
It's like 7244 South Prairie, if I have the address right, whatever, for all of you who want to go visiting.
I know. For everybody that wants to go knock on the door, I got chased down Loretta Lynn's driveway by a German Shepherd, by the way. But so was it like a Victorian style? Was it
Good question.
Was
It's
it a
what they
big
call
house?
a prairie-style house. It's essentially a duplex, one over the other. It's very narrow, like a shotgun. It goes from the front of the lot to the back. So you walk up the stairs to the front. You open a big door, and inside there's a little entryway, and there's
Foyer
stairs on the
entryway.
right that go up to the upstairs where Capone's brother Ralph supposedly lived for a while. And on the left, there's a door, and it goes into Al Capone's house. And so you go through that door. It takes a slight right curve. Off your left is the living room where Al Capone's brother, in April of 1924, laid in his coffin while they had a wake for him in the house. And then off to the right is a bedroom. As you go down the hallway, there's a bathroom. You continue down the hallway. On each side of you, there's two more bedrooms, one to the left, one to the right. Then you enter into the dining room. Off the dining room to the right is the kitchen, and the kitchen opens onto like a balcony on the back, but it's stairs. You can go up and down all three levels, all two levels of the house. And there's apparently, although I didn't see it, there's like a servant staircase from the kitchen up to the upstairs.
So it would have been considered like a pretty grand place. I mean, I'm sure as far as like size and that sort of. If you throw servants into the equation.
Yeah,
then,
I don't think he had servants, but
but I mean, the home must be large and beautiful.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
well
yeah.
yeah, it's got the
It's
living
interest-
room window to the left and the door on the right.
Well, it's interesting that you walk through the bedrooms and all that to get to like the kitchen and dining room. Right?
Yeah. Well, you walk down a hall that passed him as you went.
Right.
So.
Not through them literally, but
And
Well, that's neat.
there's stories. It's fun to see this in your head while you're in the house. Al Capone's. You're thinking of in 1924 when his brother was killed on Election Day by police because he was beating up people to make sure they voted the right way, and he laid in his coffin in that living room. And then also there's the time the reporters showed up at his house, and Al Capone answered the door, with his shirt and tie and suit pants on, but with a robe, and he's stirring a pot of marinara. He's making red sauce for dinner, and he invites them in, and they all have a nice time, And that's when he talked about how he couldn't even sit in his own living room window without pulling the curtain shut because somebody would,
Right.
shoot through the windows.
Right. Well, let's go on to another. How about Bonnie and Clyde?
Bonnie and Clyde. Well, there's a Bonnie and Clyde festival in Gippsland, Louisiana, which is like northwest Louisiana. It's a little nothing burg of a town, which has actually gotten smaller over the years. They used to have a theater and a thriving business district.
Till the interstate came through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just wrecked now. And but 9 miles south of Gippsland, Louisiana, in May of 1934, Bonnie and Clyde headed south of town about 9 miles and were caught in an ambush and killed. And so I've been fortunate enough to be. I have gone to the gas station, the Barrow gas station that's on West Dallas. I've been to their graves. A guy who ran with them by the name of Raymond Hamilton, who was put in the electric chair, actually. His birthday and mine are the same day, May 21st. But I've been in that festival several times, and I actually got to play Clyde Barrow a couple years. And one year we had a 34 Ford like they were killed in that was restored specifically to be like that. So it was really interesting to hear those same engine sounds and everything, the car sounds you would hear heading down that road where they actually were killed. So
So they came out of what's the name of the town again?
Gippsland.
Gippsland, and that's where their ultimate demise came from. 9 miles out of. So their last interaction with a town. Did they do any? Did they rob anything? In
Good question. They were hanging out there. They were out of Texas. They had a supposed friend by the name of Henry Methvin. and they had sprung him from jail, and they were hanging out in the area. They wanted to stay there. The rumor is that Clyde had saved up enough money to buy some property there, which really wasn't a smart idea. The only thing that kept him alive so long is constantly moving. And they did what I call deep cover. Babyface Nelson, when he went undercover, they went to Buffalo, New York and rented an apartment. What Bonnie and Clyde would do in deep cover is they would drive for 9 hours a day or more and then pull off in a field, pull the seats out of the car and sleep on that, put them back in and go again. That's what really kept them alive. So the idea of buying a piece of property in Gibson, Louisiana was no good. Well, Henry Methvin was wanted for various crimes, and his father, Ivy Methvin, made a deal with the Texas law enforcement, and it's a dirty deal all around. Clyde Barrow had purchased a truck for Ivy Methvin so that he could have work.
But not using his name though, right?
No. Yeah. He gave him the money, and Ivy Methvin purchased the truck. Well, that truck was the bait used. They parked that truck 9 miles south of Gibson, Louisiana with a tire off it, like it had a flat. And here comes Clyde Barrow, and he knows that truck, and he knows Ivy Methvin.
Oh, man.
And they had parked it in Clyde's lane. If you're down there, to the right of the road as you're going south, the route Bonnie and Clyde took, to the right it goes downhill, but to the left it goes uphill. And the cops were hiding in the bushes on the left. So they put the car in the right lane and drove Clyde. When Clyde stopped, he had to pull right to the left up against this embankment. And he's looking at Ivy Methvin to his right, and the cops are to the left.
Was Ivy with the truck or just?
Yes, he was with the truck. And they made up stories later that he did it against his will and was tied. Well, that was just so that no Barrows or Parkers came and killed him later. But really, he participated fully. He was leaning in the passenger window, talking to Bonnie and Clyde, and one of the cops lets loose the first shot, takes Clyde just above and behind his left ear, and he's dead instantly, falls against the steering wheel. All the cops unload with shotguns and fully automatic weapons, and Clyde's foot comes off the clutch, so now the car's going down the road, and they think he's getting away again. And they keep shooting and shooting, and
So he was taken out with the first shot.
with the first shot,
I wonder what shot took Bonnie. I mean, I wonder if she had took,
If you
how
read-
many.
if you read the autopsies, there's so many bullet tracks through her, it's beyond belief. In fact, her right hand is almost severed from her body, and one of her fingers is completely shot up in the palm area, and another is shot off at the middle knuckle. I mean, we're talking the amount of firepower through this car was amazing. There was no chance. There was also no warning given. Not like, throw your hands up, Clyde Barrow, we're going to take you alive. No, we're killing you.
Well, did Ivy get killed too?
He
Because if they started firing like that, did he know to roll and
he dove under the truck, and he apparently later said that first shot nearly took my head off. Because his head is in the passenger window.
That's
You
why
gotta
I asked the
remember,
question.
Yeah. So he dove under his own truck that was purchased for him as a nice gift by Clyde Barrow, who he was then working to set up for death. So.
I wonder if his son did his son have reap any benefits if he was broken out too?
They had made a deal.
A deal.
They had made a deal that if he stayed in that area, he was okay. And Texas law enforcement later was able to lure him out and arrest him. They arrested him in Texas on, whatever. At any rate, years later, and the Barrows and Parkers and Methvins, there's a bunch of them still around, by the way, still think that Methvin was offed. He was... The standard story is that he was drunk and fell asleep under a freight train, which then started up and ran him over and killed him. And others say he was placed there. So
Why do so many drunk people get killed on train tracks?
I used to
Seriously.
see it all the time when I grew up, because across the street from me was the railroad tracks, and across the street from that was all the bars in town. So drunks were constantly, while I'm like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, getting hit, and we follow the guys picking up noses
Oh,
and
my
fingers and shit
gosh.
the next fucking day.
Well, that
you
answers
save
my
them?
question.
They just seem to fall out when the heavy gravity.
Did you save
of
them?
The iron, no.
Maybe it has something to do with the iron and iron poor blood. And
Well,
the
if you
gravitational
trip on
wave.
those
Away
railroad
from
tracks,
outer space.
I had a very good friend. He was a Seneca Indian named Sleepy Eye, actually was his name. And, you know, he would drink a lot. We'd go out and have fun, and he tripped on the tracks and split his head open. So I think a lot of them trip on the
That's
tracks
probably what it
and
is.
split
They
their head
trip.
open. That's my thought.
Well, that
Falling
makes
and I can't
sense.
get up.
They just trip. That's it. It's that simple.
Don't be tripping. Don't be tripping on the tracks, bitches. Don't be tripping on my tracks.
Kids, get off of my tracks.
I was sitting there, well, that's not something about. That's a whole other story. Except this vagabond per se. I was sitting at when Nashville area was still kind of rural. There was a railroad track that didn't even have a bar that came down, and it was in the country out where we live, the country. And the freight train's going by really slow, and I'm like, drumming my fingers. I'm probably 16, just got my license, and this railroad car goes by, and there's this guy with no teeth. And he's just
Howdy.
exactly and he's waving like
Y'all
and
got any vittles?
it was perfect.
And he did that for the entire 500 miles of the train trip, right?
Yeah.
But this my friend's Kathy J. Garcia. She had a house in this one part of town where the tracks came by, several yards back from her backyard, but the same cat came back like 3 times. I think it was twice. From Memphis. It had an ID tag. It was a Memphis number, and the cat kept jumping on the train near its owner's house and riding the train and jumping off at Kathy's house. It's like 300
Right?
plus miles, yeah.
Man,
So they
it's a
finally,
hobo cat.
Amazing.
yeah, Kathy got a hold of the owner the second time. The owner's like, just keep the cat.
The cat's calling the shots.
Right.
right.
Okay, now back to
Bonnie
Bonnie and Clyde, and now I was reading. I went on to Wikipedia, and there's so much about them,
Yes.
and pictures and all that, and I didn't realize it was going to be so much interesting material.
It's
This has
unbelievable, isn't it?
a picture of the life change. They shot their way out of the Joplin hideout.
Oh,
Have you seen this
this
one?
picture you're looking at here, I have stayed 3 times in that building
Now, it's a garage with an apartment above. Because I'm
yes.
assuming this will be a 1933 photograph.
This is
and it's been
another
restored,
security
right?
issue. This is in Joplin, Missouri,
Right.
which is in the far southwest portion of Missouri, as they say.
Missouri, yeah.
Missouri. And the reason for that is, number one, the location is that you're close to Kansas and you're also close to Oklahoma, and it doesn't take long to get to Arkansas. So he's looking to cross state lines from that point if the cops show up, because at that time, local police were not allowed to follow
Yeah.
you across a state
Right,
line.
right.
Yeah.
Now, the thing to know is 2 or 3 days before they got this house, they had gotten another house to rent, which was wood. This house was chosen because there's also a garage in back of it, but this house is stone, and you're on the
it's
second
obviously
floor.
stone.
This was picked because it's a fortress,
And it stops bullets.
and it could hold all 3 of their cars.
Well, there's a bunch of pictures of them leaning against these really fantastic cars with guns and that sort of thing.
These are what they call the Joplin photos. So these pictures were captured after the shootout in Joplin,
Okay.
where I believe 2 officers were killed.
Did you ever get to see the 2-unit Red Crown Tourist Court?
That was
location?
torn down many years ago, but I've been to a Bonnie and Clyde symposium there, and we've walked that property extensively and what all. You'll notice that is another property that is built of stone. It has
Yeah.
connecting garages, so from your little bungalow, you could get into your garage.
Right.
So they came barely out in that one, and that's where Buck Barrow was mortally wounded at getting away from
Right, and here's a picture here with Blanche being taken away.
Blanche being taken away.
Now, didn't she get shot in the eye?
I believe really what it was glass fragments.
Mm-hmm.
She had glass fragments in her eye, but not like a bullet sailing through her head or anything. But now that's what Buck had happen. He had an actual bullet hole through his head.
Because Blanche served 6 years because she had never fired a gun.
But he lived for days. Infection finally took Buck in the hospital.
Well, let's talk. I want to hear about. We were talking earlier. Well, what time are we at?
40.
See, flies by when you're having fun on the Bob Dean Show. Yay! Sammy Sloot. Yay. Let's take a few minutes to talk about because what you were talking. Well, the actors group were you because we're going to come back and talk about this on another show too. So stuff we didn't hit. And I'm going to do more homework on it because this is fascinating. I've always been fascinated.
When you dig in, it's very
yeah. But tell the listening and now viewing audience.
Hello, TV land.
Hello, TV land. I look so much. Is it really adding 10 pounds? If you tell me it does, I'll kick your. Anyway,
you look taller.
The acting group where you did the festival group.
Okay, it was a group started in the mid '80s. If I'm not mistaken, and it was back then. It was called DEOA, Depression Era Outlaw Association.
Is it still? Is the troupe still in?
Yes, they still exist.
Okay.
And they switched names at some point to Reenactments, etc., which means ETC stood for Early 30s Crime, and now we're called Public Enemies. So it's a bank robbery group that is hired by towns. They hire us to perform a bank robbery at their town festivals, and so
like the Hooterville Wheat Harvest Festival or 4th of July or something.
Hootersville, yes.
Yeah,
that's it exactly. But excitingly, that's how we get into the Bonnie and Clyde Festival in Gibson, Louisiana, and also one of my favorites, Mason City, Iowa. You might say, what's in Mason City, Iowa? Well, John Dillinger robbed the First National Bank in Mason City, Iowa in like March 13th, 1934. And I got to play John Dillinger in that. And so we go to these towns, we get hotel rooms, we tow in vintage cars. I have a 31 Buick. I also have two 1930 Fords.
I cannot wait to see these.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And we other members have other cars too, other Fords and Chevys, and I can't even name them all. Whippets, Essex Terraplanes, which was Dillinger's favorite car, the 33 Terraplane, which had a straight 8 engine in a very light car, so it was fast. And then we have the whole thing worked out. We have bank alarm bells rigged, and we have people playing. Civilians, as you might call them, who get taken hostage during the show. And
that sounds fun.
Especially in Mason City, Iowa, we try to reenact their bank robbery, which happened,
Was it the actual structure?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Cool. How awesome is
that? I know.
We went and looked at it the night before we did the show, and my guy I knew said to me, you'll be the first person to stand in that spot with a Thompson submachine gun since Dillinger 75 years ago.
Holy crap. If walls could talk, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was, and it's so rough to say because people are judgmental. They think, you shouldn't break the laws and everything like that. Well, punk rock, sorry, laws get broken. John Dillinger was not a bad guy. He was only ever accused of killing one person in East Chicago, was Officer O'Malley. The witnesses, if you read the actual witness accounts, are highly, what do you call it? They don't agree with each other.
Judgment.
Yeah.
They don't agree with how they saw it?
Well, one person says this guy shot him, another person says that guy shot him, and then who they identify these people as being is all over the place. So and it's also highly questionable if in winter of 1934, if Dillinger, they had spent New Year's in Florida, and I think Daytona Beach, and the house was just knocked down this year that they stayed in, by the way.
No, of course it's knocked down. Thank you, developers. Thank you, developers. We need more retail shopping and office space and strip malls. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
So, but they supposedly made it up all the way to East Chicago in like a matter of 2 days or something, which is. That's really pushing it.
Yeah.
You'd have to have a lot of luck to do it. I think maybe it is possible, but you'd have to have a lot of luck because bad roads, those cars broke down. You got lots of flats, things like that. Those roads were 2-lane, wavy roads. They weren't like
they
our
weren't even what
interstates.
they weren't even what they were in the 40s and 50s.
No.
As far as like Route 66. But anyway.
Yeah. So he supposedly made it up there, and in the course of the bank robbery, killed this guy. But it really. So some people think he did.
So
kill
wait,
him,
but so in the course of that trip, he killed this guy. But they were outlaws then. Were they wanted for bank robberies and that sort of thing before the unfortunate incident?
Yeah, he gets. He's only doing a short run, really, of bank robberies. He's released. He gets screwed over. This guy gets him drunk in his hometown. I believe it was Mooresville, and gives him a lead pipe and wanted him to rob this store owner. As he walked home, he would take the money home with him every day, and so that goes horribly wrong, and Dillinger gets arrested for it. And the authorities, being what they are, which is to say dishonest, they advise Dillinger, this is a young man, Dillinger, we'll go easy on you if you confess. What they didn't tell him was Indiana state law dictated that if you confess to this, you had to get the maximum sentence. So the guy who was with him, who was a full adult, he got off with 5 years, and he gets out in 3 or whatever. And Ed Shaw, no, that's not it. And Dillinger gets like a 10-year sentence. And while he's in there, his wife leaves him. His father never showed up to the sentencing or the preliminary hearings. His father never went to see him in prison, nothing like that. And at some point, I think Dillinger changes, and he comes out, and he's going to have a good time, and he's going to take it out on society. So he goes robbing some low-level banks. He made friends with bank robbers in there. He networked with professionals, and this was a real profession at the time, not like it is nowadays. And he robbed and got enough money together, and he got guns smuggled in, and 10 guys broke out of prison, and he hooked up with them, and that's like what they call the first Dillinger gang, although, the idea that he's actually running it, these were cooperatives, right? So it's not like Hollywood where one guy says, we're going to do this, and that's the way it's going to be. These people worked together, and they had different jobs. I think you'd find that interesting. Everybody knows Wheelman for the gang. One of their wheelmen for the Dillinger gang actually drove race cars earlier in his life. You had what they called a center fielder. That was the guy that went into the bank and took over the lobby, made sure all the customers laid down and nothing happened. You had a guy called the Tiger who stood at the door, and he made sure nobody left, but he also took control of anybody coming in. Then you had
that's something I've always wondered about, especially in a situation like that. How would he, discourage somebody from coming in?
You wouldn't discourage them. You let them get there, and then you grab them and don't let them go. And then you had guys who were called skimmers, and those were the guys who went behind the tellers' cages and skimmed up all the money. They would usually, on a real bank job, they would usually identify the head teller first because he knew how to open the vault. You would grab that guy, hit him over the head to get his attention, you take him to the vault, and then you start cleaning the vault out. And you would try to be out of there very quickly. You would do the whole job in a car that was stolen for the purpose. You would ditch it 4 miles out of town, and you'd have other cars waiting. You'd take off. You'd also have equipment, such as maybe you'd have bandages or morphine. You'd have corks, because if your gas tank got shot up, you'd stop and put a cork in it. You might have gas stashed along the route. You might have food stashed along the route. There was all kinds of things. They would make things called git maps. They would show up in a town a week, a month before a bank robbery, and they would have one guy drive the route, and another guy wrote down, not drawing a map, wrote down 3/4 from the T intersection, there's a stop sign, blah, blah. And then as they were making their getaway, the guy in the passenger seat was reading these instructions. Okay, in a 1/4 mile, you're going to hit a T intersection. You want to take a left. Turn the page, like that.
Fascinating.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and
That's fascinating stuff.
One thing I've always wanted is to contact the FBI, because I know they've hung on to some of those.
I know. I'd like to.
Oh, hell yeah.
To see an actual git map would be
then follow
interesting.
it.
Well, I can tell that you really know your stuff, and we're just scraping the surface in this episode, because you get really passionate, just like I do when I'm talking about certain things. You go, I do the same thing, right? And I break for like 3 seconds to gather my thought and follow with what. Yeah, this is great, because I know that we're running out of time. Are we not? Dang it, time goes by so fast on the Bob Dean Show. Yay! Well, look, Louie, I want to say thanks, and we're definitely going to have you back. We're going to I want to dig in more about gangsters and, of course, punk rock. And
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure. First time I've ever done anything like this. So.
Well, it's fun, and we have a really good time, and I do, and I'm really excited to see how we look on. So this will be available on the same thing on iPhones.
Yep.
Like, will Zach be able to help me put this up on my website?
Oh yeah.
Zach.
I
Love
can't
you,
wait.
Zach.
I can't wait to get into the punk rock debauchery.
Oh man, seriously, it's fascinating. It's really cool.
There's some really amazing shit in that.
Maybe someday we could even do. Can we do it? An out like a version where we're walking around.
Yeah, totally.
We could do a Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
Somebody better be taking notes.
What are some popular crime sites in L.A.?
Well, okay. We're gonna write all that stuff down.
That's
great. But I
after
was
the
thinking-
time period that I know, but there are.
But we could go. We
Mickey
could go.
Cohen was big here, and he was shot here, and all that.
Oh, well, listen. Whatchamacallit? I have a friend who used to bag. Who was the big
Bodies?
one? No, groceries for the 50s gangster. That
Well, Mickey Cohen
that started.
is the 50s guy.
Is it Mickey Cohen that lived in Brentwood? Bugsy Siegel.
Bugsy
My
Siegel.
my friend Hector, who he and his lovely wife Carol had been together since 1960. Whatever. He went to uni high.
No way.
Where
no
The
way.
connection.
where he on 6 degrees of separation in this town, y'all.
It's amazing.
I have been to the house where Bugsy was killed. I haven't been in, but I've been to it.
Well, then you got to meet Hector. Well, he used to bag on the corner of Beverly Glen and Santa Monica, where there's a Walgreens now, of course. Used to be a supermarket where Bugsy would shop, and Hector would bag his groceries because Hector lived over here in West LA, where Darby lived. And it's just really, there's so much to talk about on the Bob Dean Show. Yeah.
And of course, you never called him Bugsy to his face.
Oh.
We'll get into that on the next
Yeah.
show. We got to go.
He's a crimepedia, man.
I think it's awesome. So anyway, remember, I'll be at the Laugh Factory on March 12th, Monday, 7:30 p.m. Everybody who's anybody will be there. In the meanwhile, is there anything else we need to touch on? Thank you so much, Sammy, for setting us up for video.
Yay, Sammy.
Yeah, yay!
That's a real one.
That's a real yay! And so we didn't take any pictures. Yeah, okay. I guess that's it. And we'll be back again next week. God bless. And oh yeah, next week, this guy that's going to be on next week, you're going to love him.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be you, but you'll be on soon. All right, I guess we're done. Thank you all very much.
Bye.
Yeah,
Sayonara.
Bye. Sayonara.